All right, so what we're going to start out with, hopefully you can hear me okay, but we're going to start out looking at our green sheet and starting to think of all the elements. So this is pretty simple because we all have really the same exact elements, right? We all have the base, we all have the lines, we all have the four squares, the two little squares, and then the one rectangle. So what we're going to start generating right now is what we refer to as a cut sheet. And we'll use cut sheets for many different things. Model building's one. When we start getting a little bit more down the line, we'll start talking about like estimating cut sheets and things like that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of create a shopping list of all of these different items. And what I'm going to do kind of to initially start out is I'm just going to do a really quick little sketch of my model, right? So whatever it might be, I'm just going to kind of do a quick little representation of what I had. And does it have to be exact? The answer is no. You're just kind of popping something that looks similar in a way, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. And then lastly, I'm going to kind of throw that up in the corner. So my next step to this is I'm going to start actually like making an actual list. So I'm going to say base is my first item. And then I'm going to have lines, right? So in this case, I've got 5 lines, right? So I'm going to put my last line in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find some way to number all of these things, right? So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start keying these things as L1, L2, L3, so on and so forth. So whoever that is, can you yell that out? I couldn't see anything. Sorry. L2, L3, L4, and lastly L5. Right. So I've got my list L1, L2, 3, 4, 5. And what I can do now is I can actually start to start numbering these. So these are going to be, maybe I'm calling these big squares, right? So we're going to create the itemized list. I've got L1. Let me skip a line. So I'm going to go L1, L2, L3, L4, L5. And then maybe these little squares I'm going to call 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I'm going to call these, we'll call them LS's, LS1, LS2, LS3, LS4. I'm running out of paper. You guys hopefully are using a bigger sheet of paper. And then maybe I'll have SS1 and 2. So then I'll have let me just I'm going to do 2 rows here. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to say LS3 for large square 3, large square 4, small square 1, small square 2, and then obviously this is just going to be rec 1. So I'm going to go REC1. Okay, so what I've got right here now is essentially my cut list. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm pretty much just going to sketch a really fast little, like, I need the pieces, right? So we're getting ready to cut this thing out of cardboard. And so what I like to do is quite simply, like, this is just going to be a 10-inch by 10-inch. So I just write that down, 10-inch by 10-inch. And what I normally do is I normally draw a little illustration of what it is, just to kind of remind me of what it is. And that way I know when I start getting to actual cutting this thing out, I know that my base is just going to be a 10-inch by 10-inch, and it looks like a square, right? It's just a little flat piece of cardboard. I'm going to roll down to my L1, and I'm going to pretend that my L1 was this like diagonal triangle one that used to be here, right? So quite simply, what I'm going to do is this is my L1 up here, so it's here. For mine, it doesn't matter, but you guys are going to be really precise. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a really quick little illustration of what this looks like, right? So my L1 looks like that. Okay, it's quite simply a little triangle. What I'm going to do from this point is I'm going to quite simply just put a little dimension. I know it's 10 inches long, and I know mine was 6 inches tall. I really don't need this. If you really want, you can Pythagorean theory and figure out the dimension of that. That's one way to do it. You could also just go into SketchUp and measure from corner to corner if you really want to know what that number is up there. I'm going to say for this, I don't really care. I know that there's a 90-degree angle in the corner, so I'm coming over 10, up 6, connecting the 2 dots, and I'm going to be good to go. And then, of course, I go to my L2. So I look at my little diagram. L2 is this line right here. What does this line look like? In my example, this line just looked like a long, skinny rectangle that's 10 inches long by 2 inches tall. And then I'm going to go on the 3. What does 3 look like? What does 4 look like? What does 5 look like, right? Because I numbered them on my little key. And quite simply, every one of these, I'm just simply going to draw a little illustration, right? So maybe this thing looked like that, right? So I'm going to come in here and dimension it. 10, 4, 4, and then this is actually midway point. So I'd say 5 and 5, right? So you basically just draw your little illustrations of each of your little items. It gets a little more complex when you start getting down into the squares, because if you simply did a square and extruded it up, so if you, I'm drawing this in pencil or in pen, but if you simply did this, that's pretty simple, right? All 4 sides are going to be the same. It's not that big of a deal. Some of you guys did some pretty tricky things, right? So some of you guys kind of took your base and dented it in, came up, and then did something. You did something a little weird in here. Some of you guys did just different things, so I don't know what each of you guys did, but I've seen you guys have done different things. So what happens with this is you're drawing for your box, yeah, it looks like a box at the top, but it didn't look like a box from the side. Whatever these pieces are, you're going to kind of have to start figuring out what all the little elements are of your various boxes that you did. And what this can be is and you start to come up with your sequence, right? So I typically start with the left-hand side and work clockwise. So if I'm looking at LS1, this is my LS1, my large square 1. And what I basically do is I look at this and I go that, this is side 1, side 2, side 3, side 4. So sometimes when you start getting into these more complex areas, you have to kind of break it down and go, okay, what was side 1 of large square 1? What was side 2 of large square 1? What was side 3, side 4? And what you would do is, obviously I don't have enough room on this piece of paper, but your breakout, your cut sheet should be on a much larger sheet of paper. And what you can do is you can kind of say, LS1, and then you could go 1. Well, 1 was just a square, and it was 1 inch wide by 4 inches tall, right? Let me do this in pen so it's a little easier on screen. So let's say it's a 1 and a 4, right? And then side 2 is the back side. Side 2 might have been that funky little whatever, right? And so I'd put my little dimensions on here so I knew what everything was. And then what I might realize is that side 3 is the same as side 1. And so quite simply what you could just do is you could just say, what I do is I just say equal to 1, right? So it's equal to 1. And then you do part 4, and whatever that is, you draw that one. And what this is going to give you is, this is going to give you an itemized list of all of your parts and pieces of your model. And what you can do from this is when we get to the model building, you could start laying these things out and then simply just start cutting these things out. And you don't have to keep referring back to your SketchUp model every 2 minutes. Like you're going to cut one piece and you know, at the ARL, your computer isn't typically right next to you. So your computer might be on the back side of the classroom and your desk, your workstation where you do all of your cuttings in the middle of the classroom. The other thing that I want to tell you is that when you're in studio, even like when you go to college, a lot of times you're not going to have access. And sometimes you have your own laptop and hopefully you have access to your stuff. But a lot of times you're not going to have everything, all of your files and resources. So you'd actually have to go to the computer lab to start figuring out what all of your sizes and pieces are. So this is good practice. Again, I simply call this a cut sheet. Some people call it an inventory sheet. I do a lot of woodworking, so I always call these cut sheets. And what I typically do is I start to arrange these things onto like board, and then I go from a cut sheet to a board layout. What we're doing right here, we're simply just trying to figure out all of our measurements, and then we're going to put that onto chipboard, cut those things out, and be good to go. So I'm going to pause right there. Does everybody understand that? Give me a hands up if you understand like the concept of this. All right. So I'm gonna put one of you on the spot, guys. I'm just gonna yell a name out, and I can see a face. So, Colin, can you just real quickly, why do we even waste our time doing this? Just in your own words. Gotcha. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, sir. All right. So, guys, that's it. This is kind of like your next step. I know some of you guys are still probably working on your AXO drawings, which is fine. This is just another element for tomorrow's class as we start to get into like, I'm going to teach you guys how to do some very like simple gluing techniques. And I'll do that first thing tomorrow. Other than that, you'll sort of start to need these dimensions so that you can start actually cutting your objects out. Obviously, when you guys cut them out, you typically have to kind of sketch them onto your chipboard prior to cutting them out. So basically, we're going to transfer this, 10 inches by 6 inch triangle. We transfer that right to a piece of chipboard. We grab a pair of scissors. We're going to snip that triangle off, and then ultimately that's going to get glued to the base. Again, what I like to do, and you guys, I want you guys to start developing your own habits. This is your first model, so I will give you recommendations. What I do is, as I create my cut sheet, what I personally do is take a pencil, and what I'll do is once I cut out this L1, very lightly in one of the corners, I'll just write L1. And then I'll go down, I'll cut my L2, and in the corner of the actual piece of cutout chipboard, I'll simply write L2 in the corner, L3. When I get down to my boxes, what I'll actually do is I will actually cut out the 4 sides, assemble the 4 boxes, and then I'll put a little piece of pencil, or you'll put a little mark on there that'll say LS1, LS2, LS3, LS4, right? So I'll basically assemble all of my pieces prior to even gluing anything down to my original base. So it's just a good technique. I'm going to pull up a real quick little video, so give me a second here.